Welcome to our channel, Behind My Story. Please like, share, and subscribe.
We all enjoy watching horror movies. The fear, the torture, the suspense, the excitement. We have to watch them to the end to see if the evildoers get what they deserve. We love this kind of excitement from time to time. It interrupts our boring daily routine. We watch movies that excite and terrify, that stir our emotions, spark our imagination, present what if situations. We imagine what we would do if faced with the same situation in real life. I never really thought that I would actually have to go through something like that, though. My name is Sola. I'm 14 years old. I live with my mom and my brother. My father left us long ago, and we don't know where he went or anything else about him. Mom lost hope and gave up trying to find him. She decided to raise us alone. My brother Carl and I were best friends. He trusted me with all his secrets. We didn't have any relatives, and very few people came to visit us. One day, Mom received a phone call, and as she was talking, her face changed. Suddenly, she seemed afraid. She saw me coming and tried to force a smile on her face, but I noticed, and I heard her say, "Yes, it's the same address. When did you leave the hospital?" "Sure, sure, I'll wait for you." I wondered why Mom was so nervous, and I asked her, "Who were you talking to?" She told me that she was talking to her brother, and I thought, "Brother? You never told us you had a brother." Then she explained that her brother had left a long time ago and had just returned. She told me that he was coming to visit us tomorrow. I didn't know why Mom would have kept her brother a secret from us, but I was still excited to meet my uncle. Carl was at summer camp, which meant that he was going to miss meeting Uncle. Too bad. The next day, Mom cleaned the house and told me not to speak too much with Uncle because he didn't like talkative people. When Uncle arrived, Mom and I welcomed him. He was handsome, with long, soft blonde hair and an amazing smile. He told Mom that I was so beautiful, but Mom seemed worried rather than pleased upon hearing this. Uncle was so funny, and I loved him. He told me a lot of stories about Italy and other places. After a short time, he had to leave. I didn't want him to go, but he insisted. He said that he would see me again soon. Mom seemed horrified. I looked at her and asked her what was wrong, but she didn't answer. She just held her right arm. I thought it was very strange. Even stranger still, later that night, after I had gone to bed, I was startled when Mom woke me in the middle of the night to warn me never to accept any invitation from Uncle, even if it was just to go for a walk together. I thought that was very odd and asked her why, but she said that she would explain everything later. Next day, she went to visit my brother and take him some stuff that he needed. Before she left, she looked at me for a second, then she warned me not to go out alone. A while after she had left, the doorbell rang, and I opened it. Uncle was standing there. He asked where Mom was, and I told him she had gone out to do some errands. I asked him to come in, but he refused. As he was leaving, he hesitated and turned around and asked me if I would like to go to get some ice cream with him at a park. I recalled Mom's warning, but I thought to myself, he's my uncle. What's the worst that could happen? So I shrugged off Mom's warning and I went with him. I was glad I did because we had a great time, laughing and eating. He even told me some more stories. At some point during our talking, he looked up at the sky and said, "What beautiful birds." I looked up to see what he was looking at, when suddenly I felt something like a needle jab in my neck. Then all went out. I woke up to find myself in a deserted place against the wall with my hands tied over my head. Uncle was sitting on a chair with a strange collection of tools in front of him. His expression wasn't friendly at all, and he had a scary look on his face. I asked him where I was and what he was doing, but all he said was not to worry, that we were going to have some fun together. He then emphasized that the important thing for me to know was that screaming wasn't allowed. He asked me if I was ready for a simple test, but before I could reply, I felt a red-hot branding iron pressed against my leg. Contrary to his cautionary instructions, I screamed. In fact, I screamed a lot and very loudly. But instead of being angry, he just laughed and said that he loved to hear people scream. Then I lost consciousness from the pain. I woke up to a shocking splash of cold water. He told me that it was much too early to start fainting yet, Then he grabbed a cattle prod. He put it against my arm. I gasped and couldn't breathe due to the electric shock. I screamed some more, shouting between ragged breaths. "Are you crazy? What do you want from me?" He slapped me hard across the face and said, "This is my revenge, and you're the unfortunate recipient of it." Then he slowly but gently dragged the sharp tip of the knife across my face, with a gleeful look on his face, and said, "How would you like to have a nice, pretty scar?" Then he stabbed my arm with his knife, and I screamed again, and again he laughed. He was ecstatic, and began jumping around like an excited monkey. I didn't know if it was day or night. All I knew was that every time I would pass out with pain, I would wake up to more torture, with a new tool for him to play with. How many days must I endure this madness, I thought. Despite my agony and suffering, I thought about Carl and Mom. Then, one day, he stood in front of me and began crying. He said that all of this was because of my mother. He told me that he had only been playing with Mom when he stabbed her in the arm, and that he had only meant to scare her a little, that she really shouldn't have summoned the police to have him arrested and committed to an asylum. He said he couldn't forgive her for that he can't trick or harm her again, so he decided to harm me instead. Then he smashed my knee with a hammer, and I lost consciousness again. When I woke up, he was gone. This was my chance to escape. But how? I tried pulling my hands out of the ropes. Though it chafed my skin painfully, I was able to free my hands. I was shocked to see how badly injured I was. I clumsily clambered up the ladder with my smashed kneecap, but found the door had a big lock on it. I retrieved his hammer and managed to smash open the lock. I found myself exiting an outside storm cellar that led up to a garden where an old car was parked. I hobbled out onto the nearby road and flagged the car. The driver stopped for me, and after seeing my desperate condition, he looked very concerned and asked me what had happened. I eased myself into his car and told him just to drive anywhere away from here. Then I would tell him everything. It was nighttime when he delivered me to my home. I knocked on the door, and Carl opened it. When he saw what a bleeding, tortured mess I was, he screamed and began wailing. He hugged me while I called for Mom. She woke up, came to me, saw my condition, and began crying profusely while hugging me tightly. I told him everything that had happened and apologized to Mom for not heeding her advice. I asked them how many days I'd been gone, and I was shocked to know that my horrific ordeal had lasted 90 days. We called the police, and I took them to the cellar I was held prisoner in, but Uncle was long gone. Now I know Mom's secret, why she was afraid when he called, why she held her arm in Uncle's presence, why she warned me not to go anywhere with him. If only she had told me why, things might have been different. I have lived in fear of everything since that day. Recently, I received a letter. It only made matters worse. It said, "This isn't over yet, until we meet again." Mom and I had the sick feeling that he was still watching us, waiting for an opportunity to take his revenge. So we moved to a city far away to start a new anonymous life, to try and put this horrible experience behind us forever, even if it did haunt our every waking hour.
A love triangle can tear people apart, especially if it involves you, your husband-to-be, and your mother. Yeah, I know. Sad and complicated, isn't it? But let me tell you my story. I am Linda. I am 21 years old. I was a ballerina, and I loved acting on stages and theaters. I enjoyed all kinds of arts. They called me the butterfly because I was always supporting my colleagues and giving them positive energy. I didn't care much about love stories because I felt that none of the boys I'd ever met ever rose to the level of hero in my assessment. That is, until I met Ethan. He was an angel, handsome, educated, and a true artist. He could play music, draw, and direct movies. He was adored by all the girls on our drama team. And when he was assigned to direct our play, I ended up adoring him too. I liked everything about him. His voice, his speech, his manner, his style, and that lovely smile of his. One day, I decided to tell him about my love for him. He was working in the theater, and I asked him if he could excuse himself for 5 minutes so I could speak with him in private. He accepted, and once we were alone, I confessed to him, "Ethan, I think I love you." He was mildly surprised and pleased, it seemed, and he asked me to repeat my words again. I did, and he suddenly swept me into his arms and embraced me and said, "You are the answer to all my dreams, Linda. I have loved you from the first day I laid eyes on you." We began spending a lot of time together. One day, he told me that he wanted to meet my mother. I asked him why, and he said that by tradition, he needed to get my mother's permission to marry me. I was ecstatic and felt as if I were floating in the air. I rushed home breathless to tell Mom, who was not only my mother, but my best friend as well. When she saw me, she said, "So, someone wants to marry you, huh?" she said. Amazed, I asked her, "How did you know?" She replied, "I can tell by that euphoric look on your face and your rosy cheeks." Then she smiled lovingly. I invited Ethan to come by my home tomorrow at 8 o'clock, and I began counting down the hours till his arrival. At 8 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang, and when I opened the door briskly, he was standing there holding a bouquet of flowers. He handed the flowers to me, and I invited him to come in and sit in the sitting room. I went to Mom's room to hurry her up. Then I returned to sit with Ethan. Mom appeared at the door saying, "Hello, Ethan. Please forgive me for not greeting you at the door." I looked at Ethan. His eyes were transfixed on Mom's face. From that point, he never took his eyes off Mom for the rest of the evening. Even worse than that, whenever he would speak to her, he would just ignore me completely, as if I weren't in the same room as they were. And his looks weren't simply looks of admiration. No, they seemed to be deeper than that. I was both stunned and hurt. I had to struggle to suppress my rolling thoughts. When he finally had to leave and excused himself, he ended up not even saying a word about our marriage. Instead, he just promised Mom that he would visit her again sometime. "Ethan is so cute," Mom said after he left. Peeved, I asked, "Is he just cute, or did you like him a lot?" "I like him a lot because he will be your future husband," she replied, looking at me strangely. I was so jealous of my mom. Do you believe it? I went to my room and found a message from Ethan. "I enjoyed my visit immensely. I simply adore your mom. She is so elegant." I stabbed at my phone's touchscreen and messaged back, "Well, what about me? Am I elegant too?" He replied defensively, "Yes, of course, you are always beautiful. That goes without saying. I love you." Ethan spent the next few days constantly talking about my mom. He even asked me for her phone number. The nerve of this guy! I suddenly saw my love life crashing in flames and became so jealous of my mother that I avoid speaking to her altogether. Ethan was now speaking with her more than me. I began to argue with him over silly, trivial things. He asked me what was wrong, but I didn't answer him. I just gave him the cold shoulder treatment. One day, Mom and I were watching a movie at home, and I couldn't help but notice that she was receiving a text message every minute or so. She casually but subtly held her cell phone at just such an angle that I couldn't inadvertently read the text messages from my vantage point. Ooh, how I hated my mother at that moment. Suddenly the doorbell rang. She put down her cell phone to go answer the door. In that instant, I snatched it up and began ravenously scanning her message thread. From Ethan, "Your face is etched in my heart." I immediately took a screenshot and forwarded it to my phone. When Mom returned from answering the door, I showed her the message from Ethan that I had read and demanded an explanation. She seemed confused, then enlightened, and said, "Oh, okay, I can explain. Just calm down." I shouted angrily, "Explain what? That you two are lovers and I am a blind fool?" She replied in a sage, calm voice, "There is a misunderstanding here, and if you will calm down for just a minute, I can explain everything." Suddenly, I heard Ethan's voice behind me. He proudly held out a necklace to show me. It had Mom's picture in it. I was incensed, outraged. I said, "You have the gall to show me this necklace with my mom's picture in it? My God!" Confused and taken aback at my sudden outburst of animosity, he cautiously offered in clarification. No, she isn't your mom. She's mine. Look again." Stumped, I looked at the photo more closely. He was right. The woman in the necklace wasn't Mom. When I first looked at her, I mistook her for Mom. The resemblance was uncanny. He explained gently, "When I first met your mom, I was overjoyed. I felt that destiny had granted me not only a new wife, but a second mother as well. When I called your mom the first time, I told her that she looked just like my mother, and I asked her to please consider me as her son, too. I was shocked, speechless. Mom and Ethan were both crying tears of joy. I am so sorry for my jealous behavior. Please forgive me for my stupidity, I said in a deeply apologetic voice. Today is my wedding day, and I'm very pleased and proud to tell all my readers out there that my mom loves my husband and he her. And isn't that just the sweetest thing?
Love what you do until you can do what you love. This is a famous quote that inspires people to seek out their dream job. I heard that quote at school before I graduated and entered the working world. What's that, you ask? Was I successful in achieving my dream? Well, I came this close. Let me tell you about it. My name is Max and I'm 19 years old. Poverty and I are intimate friends and constant companions. I live in one of the poorest neighborhoods in my city. Most of the local citizens work at the seaport. The rest of us, we make a living by scavenging through and collecting rubbish. But I wasn't just an ordinary rubbish collector. No, sir, I was a specialist in that field, like my dad before me. Dad taught my brothers and me how to do it expertly. This is how it worked. Factories liked to use recycled materials to reduce the cost of buying new materials, so we would go to the city rubbish pile and separate out materials into different piles, such as plastics, glass bottles, milk cartons, tin cans, and so on. Then we would sell those materials to factories for reuse in making their products. This recycling process saved the factories a ton of money, but unfortunately, that didn't translate into a ton of money for us rubbish collectors. I had a dream one day of opening my own factory and just sitting back and watching the money flow in. When I told Dad that, he told me that good fortune only happens for a select few people. After hearing those words, I went to bed and dreamed about my future factory. Little did I suspect that my dream might actually come true someday. One day after working late collecting rubbish, while on the way home, I suddenly heard voices coming from a large rubbish pile in front of my home. It seemed that people were using that pile as a place of business to sell drugs and booze. An argument was brewing between two groups. Each group were wielding sticks and knives as makeshift weapons. One guy in Group A had a gun and shot someone in Group B, so someone in Group B stabbed gun guy in Group A. After that, a full-on fight ensued, with everyone in both groups joining in the fray. Within minutes, I heard approaching police sirens, which caused the fight to break up and both groups to run away, leaving the bleeding gun guy lying on the sidewalk. I tried to help him by staunching his bleeding. As I was doing so, I noticed a lottery ticket beside him with a letter saying that it was the winning ticket for $1 million payout. I froze. I looked around. No one was watching, so I acted, somewhat ignobly. Then I left quickly. If the police were to arrive and find me with the bleeding man, they might think that I had done it. I rushed home and fell into an easy chair, taking a deep breath of relief. While I was telling Dad about what had happened, there was a knock on the door. It was the Group A and B gangs. The spokesperson for the two groups held a knife in my direction and said, "Hand over the lottery ticket or die where you stand." Needless to say, I handed it over post-haste. But then he said, "I'm sorry, you've seen too much. You have to die." I pleaded, "But I didn't see anything, I swear." Suddenly, there was a flash from a camera, and the whole group of thugs began laughing. "You've been pranked," Dad said, as he stepped out from the crowd. My brothers were behind him laughing too. "You've been pranked," Dad said, as he stepped out from the crowd. My brothers were behind him laughing too. While relieved that my imminent death had been postponed, I was deeply saddened that I had lost my $1 million chance to get my dream factory. What rubbish.